more people come on. So I'm Melissa Pearson. Thank you for being on with us tonight. And this is a webinar that has to do with a series of webinars that myself and Joyce Kaufer offer called Equine Studies 101. So I do want to say, because I can tell there's a lot of people on the line tonight that are probably very advanced horsemen, or you've had a lot of horses, and so some of this might seem very basic. But remember, as I'm teaching this tonight, that we are doing 101, you know, just kind of the very basic things. I'll tell you just a little bit about our 101 program. There's a set of 10 webinars, and they're everything from body parts of horses and vet care and all the basic things that you do need to know if you have horses. And our average client for ES 101 is someone who maybe has had horses, but they've always boarded them out, and so now they're thinking about bringing the horse home. Or maybe somebody who says, I had a horse as a teenager, but I don't have one now, and I'm not sure the things I learned as a kid are going to sustain me as an adult. Or maybe their daughter is really into horses, but they're not so much. So they want to learn all the basics. So there's a lot of reasons why people want this 101 stuff. I'll tell you just a tiny bit about myself. I've had horses, been privileged to have horses all my life. And so for me, as a kid, I can tell you I'm lucky to be alive, because I was back in the day when we weren't brought directly to a trainer and the trainer taught you what you're supposed to know. We were a barn full of kids in Tempe, Arizona, ages 9 to 15, left to our own devices with these horses, and we did great. We're alive to tell about it, and when we get together, there's tears streaming out of our eyes and our sides hurt because we laugh so hard at all the crazy ways we learned everything, about them. So, so ES 101 is near and dear to my heart, and it just helps people get that deep foundation of the basics. I will tell you that we've had students go through ES 101 who have had horses. One woman, she had horses 23 years, and she got done and wrote us a great testimonial saying, you know what, I learned things in this that I should have known over the last 23 years, but I haven't. So I think it's a good thing to do. We have camps, and Joyce and I do one in Maryland at her facility coming up in April, and then we do one here at my place in Colorado. And so our same 6 students, we limit it to small classes, so it's 6 students with 2 trainers, myself and Joyce, and we're working with you solidly for 5 days at camp in Maryland, and then the same people come a few months later after practicing, and they do a camp at my place. With mine, we start working on how to move horses through energy and with energy, and a lot of really fun stuff, connecting with them at a different level. So it's a lot of fun. So this year we did something different. We actually have 5 trainer teams, 2 people to each team. We have 5 trainer teams, again, all the way from Maryland, Las Vegas, California. It's all across the country. And these 5 trainer teams, their clients come to these 10 webinars, and then they go to 2 camps with that trainer team. So if you're in one in California, or I think it's a lot of fun to go to the different barns. I think you'll learn a lot between traveling to Maryland and traveling to Colorado. You'll learn a ton about horses eat different things and need different vaccinations and have a different life all the way through. So. All right, well, let's get started. And I know it looks like the right side of the screen is, but it's actually not. I don't think it's going to influence it. I think this might be set to a larger, but I don't think you'll lose anything. So I am aware of that. Thanks for those of you telling me. I think it's set to a larger scale or something tonight. Okay, well, let's get started. Tonight we're talking about the emotional horse. So I want to say, first of all, that the jury is still out on whether horses, it's a debate on whether horses have emotions or not. Neither point of view could be proved right. Both believe in their truth of their points of view. So some people in behavioral science, you know, look at it and they don't feel that horses have emotions, and they think that people are doing what's called anthropomorphizing, which can happen, human emotions onto the horse. But as somebody who's had horses their lifetime, I will tell you that it's injective knowledge that really watching them when they lose a pasture mate that they've been friends with for many years, they definitely feel an emotion of sadness and of grief and many, many other things. So whether they have actual emotions is part of what we're talking about tonight. But the other, because it's a 101 class, is how do you know what a horse is feeling and how a horse is feeling? So we're going to look at it from that 101 kind of perspective here. All right. So there's an old adage. Remember Mr. Ed? I loved Mr. Ed when I was a little girl. So you can tell a gelding something, you can ask a stallion something, but you better be ready to discuss it with the mare. So that tells you a lot just about how these horses are and what kind of horse you want for yourself or to be with for yourself. So it's meant as a joke, but there's a ton of truth in an old adage. You know, geldings receive information, stay pretty same and pretty level through their life. They're not subject to all of the hormones. The stallion, of course, is a hormone factory machine, and so is the mare. So we're going to learn, first of all, about what's the difference between a stallion, a gelding, and a mare. Remember, it's 101, so if you're going, oh, you're kidding. So, do horses have emotions? I found this on the internet, and I thought it was really cute. I swear I've seen these faces on my horses many, many times, so I think they do. So let's begin at the beginning. Stallion means it's an intact male, and they're the breeding stock of the herd. So it means they still have the ability to produce foals, right? They still have the ability, or the testicles and the testosterone and such, to breed a mare and create a colt. Only very experienced horsemen or professionals should really handle stallions, no matter how nice the stallion is. I've had a stallion station in Arizona, and I've handled a lot of stallions. And many of them who were the nicest guys you'd ever want to be around. However, their mind is a every 10-second cycle of where's the mare? Is the mare in heat? Is she ready for me? Are we okay? And their other job is as the sentinel for the herd. So they're always looking at the world around them and being sure that the herd is safe. Even in a domestic, 2-acre farm, the stallion's the horse that's always feels the responsibility of protecting that herd. So they've got their mind in a lot of areas besides being completely polite to human beings. So it's there. Now, similar to dogs or other animals that have distinct breeds, I'm a huge believer, and I've been an equine breeder most of my career, most of my adult life, that if a horse remains a stallion, he should truly be exceptional. It has to do with DNA. It has to do with what do we want to create out there in the horse world. So in order for a horse to remain a stud or a stallion, they need to prove themselves to be in the top 0.5% of their breed. So there's not very many horses should remain a stallion. And they need to prove it not only by how they look, certainly they should be very handsome, but they need to prove it by temperament and by attitude and by trainability, a lot of the traits that they can pass on to the foal. One kind of funny thing, I've raised and bred many, many, many horses. I actually foaled out as a midwife over 250 foals myself, so I really know what I'm talking about here. You can walk, the way that the hormones drop down into a colt, a foal that's born a male is called a colt. You can be in the pen with him every day as a baby, and there's nothing more cute than a little baby horse. So you're in there and you're playing with him and you're doing all the things you need to do. And one day, sometimes at 7 months, sometimes at a year, somewhere in there, you stand in there and you're inside with a sassy teenager with an Uzi. I mean, those hormones come in literally in a few hours. So it's not that you say, well, as time goes on, I'll see how his personality is. It drops in with a force that is to be reckoned with. So kind of if you have a young horse, you're making that decision early on by what your plan is for that horse. And if you want a horse as a good friend and a safe animal to be around and somebody to go out and do, 99% of people do not want a stallion. They want to take that away. Some things about stallions: they're always on call. They have incredible hormones that operate their coat color. So if you see a stallion, you'll often see this vibrant color. You can't feed a gelding or a mare enough nutrients to get that color. That's a hormone color. So it makes them so shiny. They just look electric. They also have a very distinct muscle tone, that even if they're not ridden and they're not worked, they maintain that muscle tone. So a lot of that's very hormonal as well. And so when you see a stallion, they do take your breath away. They're really beautiful no matter what the breed is. They look a little different than our mares and geldings for sure. So they have that extra gloss and sheen, that extra sense of pride, and they're a lot to handle no matter who they are. So the majority of stallions are gelded. It's what it's called. Like in a dog, it's neutered, but in a horse, it's gelded. And they can be gelded as soon as both of the testicles do what's called drop. So they come out of the belly wall and they literally drop down where you can see them. So for the average horse, they drop at 6 months. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're a little older. And occasionally you'll have a horse that holds one up in the abdomen wall and only drops one testicle. And for me, then they go to surgery, and it's a bigger deal to geld them. You want to make sure they're not what's called crypt orchid, which is one testicle inside and one out. It's sort of 50% stallion, and they're never the good 50%, so it doesn't work. So they take a horse, and sometimes they do it standing up, sometimes they do it laying down. Every vet has a different way of doing it with veterinarians. This colt has his eyes covered because they'll lay very quietly. They don't need all the medications, so they'll lie very quietly that way. And then he has this foot tied so he can't kick him, and he's tied it humanely around his shoulder and chest so that it's not hurting the horse. And then they're usually given some pony downer. Most of my recent vets in the last 7 or 8 years have done it with the horse standing up. So they give the horse some medication to kind of dope them up a little bit. I call it pony downer, but and then the horse relaxes, and they're doing it standing up. There are stories, they're rare, but there are stories of Mustang colts that doesn't work for, because their belly wall is different than other more domesticated horses, and so they can drop out onto the ground in a not good way. So they'll lay them down, and that's what's happening here. This is a Mustang colt, and they're doing the gelding, so they definitely have him laid down and doped out. But it's a simple process. They get up afterwards, or they walk off afterwards, and they feel no pain at all for a little while. They definitely drop some blood on the ground, usually not a lot, maybe a half a cup of blood total would be dropped on the ground. It begins to heal within a couple hours. Everything begins to dry. They are definitely sore for 2 or 3 days, and then they're running around in the pasture like nothing happened. So temperament-wise, their emotions change at that point, and usually about 30 days later, you have the baby that you had when he was 4 and 5 months old, that's happy to see you, that's not trying to nip you, that's just, you know, docile and sweet. So most of the time they're gelded because it allows their focus to be much more people-centered and not so centered on reproduction. So the geldings are your average horse that you see people are happy with. Out on the trail is usually a mare or gelding. The geldings are, again, kind of the same personality most days. They don't have the hormonal swings, and so they get along with other horses usually fairly well. They demonstrate and are very people-oriented. They're very interested in people, and they're just what we call a people pony. So the geldings are an easy one to go where. I think I skipped one, sorry. So your mares. So a boy horse, when it's born, is called a colt, C-O-L-T. The born female is called a filly. And so the little girls are fillies, and so you ask somebody, you know, did your mare have a colt or a filly? The average time that a mare is pregnant or in gestation is 11 months and 11 days. So we had these 250 mares over my career, and they actually will do the same number of days every time they have a foal. So if I had a mare Trinity. So Trinity had her foals at usually 11 months and 16 days. And so every one of her foals, she had 5 over the life of her breeding cycle. She had 5, and they were all born that way. So the first time a mare foals, if the records are kept well, and not everybody keeps professional records, but if the records are kept well and true, then it's not a guess. You have a really good idea when the mare is going to foal. It's called polyestrous, and so they have a 28-day cycle, or they're in season for 5 days every 28 days. Now, one kind of difference with mares is that the breeding only happens when the mare says yes. So stallions know this about mares, and there's quite a courting ritual that stallions will go through. They literally, if you've never seen it happen, nibble on the mare's ears, blow in her ears, whisper sweet nothings. The stallion will be making these little nurturing noises to her. They'll bite her on the neck. They'll do all this sort of courting ritual, but they don't even get close enough to blow in her ear unless she knows she's growing what's called a follicle that can produce a foal. So she comes into season, she shows signs to the breeder that she's in season, and you begin to ask her with the stallion every day. You walk the stallion up to her and you say, is today the day? And she says, no, drop dead. And she means it. So you go, okay, we'll try tomorrow. So tomorrow, stallion comes up to her and she says, no. No, okay, it's better than yesterday when she told me to drop dead. And the next day he comes back and he asks her again, and she says, I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think so. Kind of an iffy answer. So he's getting hope, right? It's usually 2 or 3 or 4 days later. He's asked her many times when she finally says, today we can produce a baby, because she can feel when she has a follicle that's growing large enough and is soft enough to actually conceive a foal. So they do that in the wild. They do that in domestication, and there's a lot of different ways in which it's done. Some people, I always did hand breeding. There's artificial insemination. There's a lot of different ways, but they're very clear. She says yes, and only when she says yes. So mares have an elegance. So people that have been around horses all their life can usually see, it can pick out a mare or a gelding without even looking at their private parts, because mares usually have a femininity and they have more of a natural elegance about them. They also have opinions, much more opinions than a gelding has. So when we talk about emotions, you're going to see more actual emotions out of a mare. She'll express her anger more clearly, her pleasure more clearly, her demand more clearly. The geldings, by and large, are usually much more go with the flow. So once the mare has 11 months, 11 days, it's a long time, and you wait for this little baby. And once this baby is up, they are literally, just like you read in the books, they're able to be up and running very quickly along the mare's side. So this is an anthropological feat. The reason is because in the wild, the mother is worried about a cougar or a predator of some kind that could literally grab her little 150-pound foal and eat it for lunch. So most of your mares, especially your less domesticated mares, but most of your mares will foal an hour before sunrise. So you look on your time and you say, okay, sun's going to come up at 5:52, so I know that. So she's going to foal somewhere around 4:52. The reason for that is the barn's quiet, and she knows I can have this baby and I can get it up and nursing and running before the sun is fully up. So we are safe. We're the safest with that. Now, my mares all foaled in what we call our maternity ward, but doing that, going all the way through, they were foaling in a 24 by 20 stall. And there's a lot of ways in which a mare shows signs of when she's ready to have that foal. So there's lots of different ways that a breeder checks the mare and can kind of guess pretty well. I used, and the reason I was live and present for so many foals is because we had a computer system and a magnet was literally sewn onto by the vet onto the mare's external vulva. So when the foal started to come out, it would break the contact between the magnet and it would set our phones off. So we'd get a phone saying mare's foaling, and we could get down to the barn to catch her in foal. So this little baby would be, I don't know this baby, but this baby be about 4 days old with the flesh that it has on its bone and as close as it's staying to the mom and as finished as these little hooves are. This baby's about 4 days old. And they stay very close to mom for the first little bit there. And so this little filly says, wherever you go, mama, I go. And so there she is. So mares are often kept with each other in pastures and geldings in a separate pasture. I know people that have mares and geldings together in pastures that do fine once they work it out, but usually they work it out because the mares put her point across, so that kind of goes in there. So they're foaling before daylight, and there are 6 different positions that a foal can come out of a mare, and there's only one that's good. So most of them come out correctly. Because I foaled out so many mares, I can tell you that it's really worrisome when they're not in the right position. Mares don't show labor like human women show labor. They will show you labor maybe 45 minutes. They show you lots of other signs, but because their brain works differently than ours, and because their emotions work differently than ours, they're not neurotic, they're not anxious, they're not worriers. So they get the belly pain and feel like, oh, something's happening in my body. So they're present with it. They're not in anxiety over it, which anxiety causes pain, right? Because it's deeper attachment. So they stay very calm about the foaling, even their very first foals. They may not stay calm about the humans being present to the foaling. That's something you work with mares to get them to adapt to, but they usually stay very calm in the actual foaling process. Now, I wouldn't have a baby fold out on dirt, so this was not mine. Mine fold out on straw. We bed with sawdust in our barns, but I never had mares foal on sawdust. The sawdust is too many particles, too easy for her to get an infection. So we used old-fashioned straw. And so they would have these babies in this very beautiful straw. I'll back up one more thing here. So they're in a sack, of course, that comes away. The mare will tear the sack if the foal hasn't. And I'll tell you, the correct way for them to come out is diving out. So their little hooves should be right side up and together. The hooves start out, and then you see the little muzzle and then the knees. So the muzzle's usually right with the knees, and you get that part out, then the rest of it plops out pretty easily. And I've seen babies that come out whinnying. Literally, the minute the sack's broken, they're already talking. And I've seen others that take a few minutes to really rouse and come around, which of course is when you get really worried about them. About half an hour after she's delivered this foal, she'll deliver the placenta, and you want to check and make sure all the placenta is there so that she doesn't founder or have other problems. So it's quite a process, and that's why we always like to be there at the presence of the foal's birth. So if the mare needs help or needs assistance, or the foal does, we could step in. Otherwise, we let them do their thing. So this looks really funny, but a newborn foal is not something everybody's had, so I included this. When they're first coming out of the mom, this is not unusual. This is the bottom of the hoof. So this is the hoof here. See the hair coming out, we've got all this, and they'll have all of this tissue on the bottom of the hoof. It goes away right away. It goes away right away, but I think it's kind of interesting to see. My mouse pad seems very jumpy tonight, so I'll slow down. So this is something you hear about, and if you have not had the opportunity to do it before, I think it's worth knowing whether the horse you're bringing into your life was imprinted or not. So I'll tell you a little bit about imprinting. So when the foal is first born, it's really important, unless there's an emergency of some kind, it's very important that baby is allowed to bond with the mare. So humans should not be in the stall, as tempting as it is, until that baby has nursed from the mare and the mare can call to it a little bit. So that's usually an hour or so. And it is the longest hour of my life because I just can't wait to get in there and touch them. But most babies need to get up, look around. Mama will be sniffing them and licking them. They make little noises together. And then the baby begins to search for milk. The colostrum drops for 48 hours, just kind of a dripping, and that helps the baby radar in and it gets its first drink. So it's very important that a horse bonds with its mother first. That is similar to what they know emotionally as a therapist with humans. If there's bonding of the baby to the mother first, so even babies who are going for adoption, for a lot of good reasons they're going off for adoption, most hospitals today encourage the baby to go ahead and bond with that mom for a few minutes first before they're removed. So it just sets their whole world. They've been inside that world for almost a year in a horse's case, and it sets their whole world correctly. Once that foal has nursed, then you can get in there with it. And so there's many, many things. This person's putting her fingers in this foal's mouth. The foal does not have any teeth. So the foal will suck on the finger just like on the mama. And so it's one way for them to say it's okay for a human to put their finger in your mouth. You do not want to do that very long, like maybe the first couple of days, because they get teeth very quickly and they will chomp your finger instead of suck on your finger very fast. So you just do it the first couple of days. And many times I would take my finger to the bars of the horse's mouth where a bit would stay and be able to tug back on that bar just a little bit, so that's not a foreign experience for the foal when they're older. Putting weight on the horse, literally we would grab them, not grab them, but hug them around where the cinch of the saddle's going to go. We give them a hug right there, which you cannot do when they're 4 or 5 days old. They're too strong. But those first 48 hours, you can give them a hug there. You can pick up their feet, have someone put a halter on the foal, and then pick up their feet and knock on the bottom of the hoof and pick their feet up a lot. Many of our horses were going into the show pen, and so we would take electric clippers and trim their ears when they're 12 hours old. They never fought it, and they never thought anything of it. For their lifetime, they were easy to trim them. So anything you think the horse is going to experience later in life, you help them experience it now. And you make it a great experience, a happy experience, so they associate people as a good thing, as a happy thing. Now, unfortunately, you have a few things you have to do to them they don't like, which is usually an enema to clean everything out. So there's a few fun things you have to do to them that you have to make sure you do that, and then you give them lots and lots of very positive reinforcement. So imprinting can be very, very important. Sometimes we put blankets on them right away, not to keep it on them, but just put it on them and leave it on them so they can walk around in it for a few minutes and take the blanket back off. So they're able to realize, like, oh, that's okay, people put things on you. Right now, they're just a learning sponge, and they're little, so if they do argue with you, you can usually win. So it works out pretty well. But again, very important that the mare has her shot with this baby until he's up, toddling around, and they do look like Bambi on ice, toddling around and finding the mare to nurse from. You can have foals that cannot do that. They're called a dummy foal, and they're looking between the mare's front legs, or they're completely lost. And it's a sad thing when it happens. You have a shot at physically holding the foal over and draining the mare and seeing if the foal can learn to nurse. If the foal cannot learn to nurse, they wouldn't survive in the wild. They don't survive in the barn. So the vets end up coming in and putting them down. So it's a really difficult thing. It's different than in the human world, and we don't have that capacity to be able to raise a foal that can't nurse in some way, from a bucket, from a goat, from something. So, and I've had orphan foals, and they're a whole nother webinar. So goes in there. So they're usually up within 45 minutes. If the mare is not standing up within 15 or 20 minutes after she passes the placenta, you have a problem with the mare. So she can be bleeding internally, it can be all kinds of problems. So this is not for the faint of heart. When I hear people are having one mare and one foal, boy, I tell you, it's really something to be left to the professionals, I believe. It's backyard stuff is too many, it's very high risk. There's just too many things that I think you need to know before trying to just breed your mare and have a cute baby. There's so many ways it can go awry. The mare has a wrap on her tail. That's common when they're foaling out. And so you wrap the tail so the hairs aren't down there. So this mare's healthy. This foal's probably about 45 minutes old. And the mare is still like, wow, look at you, aren't you handsome, and aren't you beautiful? And very common for the mare to lick and to encourage the baby to be nursing. And her milk lets down immediately, so they're off and going. So that's the ideal way that a foal enters the world, is in a happy, safe situation, with everything going right, with, you know, everybody knowing what they're doing and things taken care of. Now the babies are fun. They are really fun. And again, this baby's probably 10 days old or so, looking at it. And so, you know, if you get a chance, this is more imprinting, you get a chance that they'll allow you to walk up when you're quiet and calm and they're laying on the ground taking a nap. And really you're watching the mare more than the foal on this, because some mares don't take kindly to this, but most mares are fine. She's eating her hay and she's happy over there and standing. You can see her hip right there on the left side of the screen. And so she's content. She's over there, maybe had a baby before. First-time mares, less likely to be comfortable with humans doing a lot with their babies. They just need to learn about it. But once they've had a foal, they get it and they calm down about it. So this person's taking the opportunity while the foal's down to just stay quiet with him and soft with him and show him it's okay for me to come in and touch you and be with you. And they can get up and clobber you. So it's, you know, you got to be ready for that. She's on her knees and comfortable with this foal, and if that foal wants to be on all fours, it's a heartbeat. It's a very quick situation. So they're ready to run with the herd. This is a wobbly little foal that we had, and it's not uncommon for their legs to look kind of crooked and for them to look, because they've been stuffed up inside that mare for so long. So you don't really know what kind of foal you have for a couple weeks. I mean, they straighten out. They can be born with the funniest looking legs. You think, oh my God, you know, this foal's going to be really goofy, but they straighten out usually within a week and sometimes within 2. So they can have all kinds of things. And then they're just strong as can be. This again's about a week old, maybe a week old foal, and they learn a lot of things the hard way. So this foal, the mare must be just outside this camera shot, and she's already trying to run around and be tough and probably bucking and kicking, and they're just the cutest things, and they're going all over. However, I will say, you see this pipe round pen behind it. I have had many, many foals who the mare will be not the best schooling mare, and the baby learns that the fence is there by running into it. Thank God they usually just kind of bounce and they recover very quickly and they learn the lesson. But that's always one of the scariest things, is introducing newborn foals to fencing. And so you don't want wire fencing. You want fencing that is either the white PVC or this pole pen, because if it hit it hard enough, it would end up on the outside of this pen. It's not going to hurt the foal. So they bounce pretty good, but it's the worst thing. You can't wait to turn them loose with the mom, and you're all excited, and then the baby goes and runs right into the pen fence, and you think, uh-oh, you know, I'm going to hurt my baby before it's even there. But I've seen a million of them hit a fence, and they go, oh, that's a fence. So kind of learn about it. And some of them are more, you know, outgoing than others. Now, this is a man, and I'm sorry it's a little blurry, but it's a photo I wanted you to see. This is a young baby too. This baby, and we did halter ours in the first 48 hours. We didn't leave the halters on them because they could get a foot caught in it. So we haltered them and took it on and off many, many times, so they just got to think in that first 48, oh, that's what we do. We wear this halter. So this is obviously a foal where the mare's probably had 2 or 3 foals before this, because she's not giving a flip that this guy's doing this with this baby. And if it was her first foal, she'd be right there with him. Her nose would be on the rope. So she's eating, she's fine. She says, I trust you, it's all good. So he has in his right hand, the hand by the foal's nose, he has the halter rope, the lead rope there. And then he has a rope, the rope also around the hind end of the foal. So he's pulling with his left hand, pulling the rear rather than pulling the face. So it's the first way that you teach a foal that when I walk, I want you to come with me. So he's going to pull the rear first, and if his foal doesn't move, he'll control the direction of the face. But you don't teach a baby that to walk by pulling on their face. So again, inexperienced people think you just pull on a horse's head. Well, that's how you teach a horse to pull back, right? That's the first thing. If you have a rope, if I pull on one end, you're going to pull back. On the other end, it's innate, it's natural. So instead, we start with a rope around the hind end, and we teach them that when I take a step, you take a step, and you walk alongside me. So he's actually controlling the left-right with the nose and the forward motion with the rear. And this is something done, it's a lot of work. It's several times a day. So you donate your time and effort to young babies. They really take... They're fun. They take a lot of repetitive work while they're little. I do know people that don't put halters on them until they're older, and they don't mess with them until they're older, and they're usually sorry because they get so strong so fast, and they just learn everything so much easier if you go ahead and do it while they're really, really little. They just accept everything, and they have a nice personality for the rest of their life. So at some point, the foals are weaned from the moms. And it can happen naturally. So if moms and foals are in a pasture, eventually the mare will wean the foal. But they don't do as much of an emotional weaning as what we sometimes need if the horse is not going to grow up with that farm for the rest of its life. So if you have a foal and you think that that foal is going to move on in its life somewhere else, or the mare is going to move on in her life, then many times it's a key time to help them emotionally disengage from nursing from the mom. So it's sort of like in the human world how a lot of times we think it's good for our kids to go to preschool or to go to kindergarten or to go to school, to separate a little bit from the mom. So mom's not their entire world, that they learn that they're okay even when they're not directly with their mother. It's the same thing for these babies. It's not all about the milk. It's an emotional time for them to learn, I'm okay on my own. I'm an individual and I'm okay on my own. So there's lots of methods for doing this. Some are more humane and some are less humane. One of the things I think that create an emotionally sound horse when you meet a horse when he's 8 or 9 or 10 years old is that this tender time of weaning was done appropriately and done correctly. If I meet a horse that I've never met before and I meet him tomorrow, oftentimes I can tell you if it was a horse that was alone when it was born with no other foals around, by their behavior, by how they treat people, by how they look at people, by where they are on a continuum of natural behaviors. And part of that is because when you have a number of babies, then when they're weaned, you wean two or three at a time. We would usually have 12 to 15 foals every spring. So we would say, okay, these 4 are going to be weaned the same day, and these 4 will be weaned the same day, and these 4 will be weaned the same day. So they had buddies and they had friends, which helped them emotionally deal with it. Some people wean where the mare is on the opposite side of a fence, so the foal sounds humane, that I can still see my mommy. But my experience is that creates a horse that ends up being easily frustrated later in life. So when you're trying to teach them something new, they're quick to be frustrated in the training process. When the foals, what we did, a 40-acre place, we would bring the foals into the maternity stalls, the big stalls, bring 4 in at a time, and leave with the mares. So the mares would go to the furthest pasture. They could hear each other if they were whinnying, but the furthest pasture and definitely out of sight. The foals were in the stalls, so they couldn't run through a fence, and we would limit the chance of any harm, you know, anything that could happen to them. So they'd be in there, and many mares did not fuss at all, especially if it was the second, third, or fourth foal. They were kind of like, oh, thank God, I get a little time by myself. You know, I'm going to go out and eat and roll and relax. But the babies have a hard time. They have a tough time with it. So if you've bonded with the babies, human to baby, you can certainly give them a lot of soothing comfort. You can say, hey, here's your food. You know, everything's going to be all right. But they mostly comfort each other. If a person has one mare that has one foal, they have a different challenge on their hands with weaning, because that foal doesn't have another buddy to learn other natural behaviors that horses learn, like, hey, don't knock into me. If you knock into me, I'm going to punch you. So they don't learn those things, and so they learn human behavior, which doesn't help them at all emotionally. So it's very tough. It's possible, but it is very tough to have a single foal end up being an emotionally healthy horse. I know people that do it, but it's a lot of work to do. It's really difficult. When they're with others, they're saying, where'd your mom go? I don't know. Where'd your mom go? You know, well, I can hear her. Can you hear her? And so they can hear it. They'll do a lot of whinnying and a lot of stuff, but they're really soothed by having a same age buddy. And by the way, putting a young foal like this, weaning them with an old gelding or another old mare, leads to a lot of injury. It's usually not a good idea. So it's not like you can just move them off onto a babysitter. The best is another foal or two or three that they can be with. So they do a lot of bonding at that time themselves, a lot of talking it over and a lot of being together. And so later in their future, you're breaking your wean bands up. So we'd have 4, 4, and 4. So once they were weaned, we made sure they didn't stay 4, 4, and 4, right? So we'd say these two go with those two, you know, mix it up so that they understood how to make friends and how to be in a social band, not just that, oh, I transferred all my feelings from mom onto this other colt, and now he's my best friend, and now I don't want to be apart from him, so when somebody rides him, I pitch a fit. So lots of horses at any age can get that way, and so we don't want to start them off that way. So they still should have lots of lessons at this age. The 6 month to 1 year mark is a great time for young horses to learn everything from loading in a trailer to standing quietly when they're tied. And there's a lot of things that they learn, and they usually are a little sponge for learning. And so they learn to approach you in a pasture. I mean, there's a lot of different things that you want them to learn. In this case, and this happens in a lot of boarding barns that I see, I never turn, this might be a breakaway halter, but I would never turn young horses loose with a halter on their head unless it's what's called a breakaway, where if this horse got his foot caught in the halter, it would break off of his face. The reason that they do this is because they can't catch this colt. So they go, oh, leave a halter on him so he's not, or her, so she's not so hard to catch. But you're really taking a risk because they're curious, and they can hook it on a post, they can hook it on each other, they can lay it down and roll and get a hoof up in here, so they can literally kill themselves with it. So it's important you spend the time with them from birth to 6 months of age to really get them to like that halter and be easy to catch, and 6 months to a year that they understand, when I come out in a pasture, come over to me, I'm a good thing for you to come to, and I put this halter on your head and we walk away. Now, at a year old, at 1 year of age, they're often very awkward and gangly, and I'll tell you that a lot of times their rear end is higher than their wither point, and then you look at them a month later and their withers are higher than their rear. So they don't look, at 6 months of age is what a horse is going to look like when it's an adult, by the way. So a lot of photography happens when they're 6 months of age, and you can kind of tell what he's going to look like when he's 5 years old. But at a year, you can't tell. I can see some of the worst looking long yearlings that turn out to be really pretty horses. So it's a kind of risky time to purchase a new horse because you don't really know what they're going to end up looking like. And so at a year, what our method was, at 1 year, they went out to pasture. And they lived for a year other than getting their feet done and veterinary work. We did not mess with them. We messed with them a lot from birth to 1 year. And then at 1 year, they were out, and they were just able to be horses, just go out and be, you know, be brutal to each other and have fun and race and do all those things and be out there. We definitely made sure we could catch them and do the shoeing, you know, do the trimming and all that kind of thing, but not a lot of messing with them that year. Think of that year sort of like 13 years old to 20 years old. You know, they've got some wild child in them, and they're disrespectful, and they're, you know, all these things are going on. If you've done your work the first year, you have a polite horse at 2, even if you turn them out. Just turn them out to go be a horse. At 2, they come in and they start short introductions to saddles and bridles. And so for me, my 2-year-olds were not horses that we rode. They were horses that learned to wear a bridle. They learned to wear a saddle. People got off and on them. They might walk around on them for 10 or 15 minutes, but it was not about training because the growth plates are still developing. So it's about being on their back maybe on 5 days out of 7, and being up on their back 8 or 9 minutes, not long at all. And then the following year, when they're 3, they can take a little bit more. Now they can be saddled, and you can start the walk, jog, and maybe just a little bit of control, left, right, back, you know, do more. And I know people are in a hurry, and that many people go ahead and do a lot of riding on young horses. But the longevity of the life of the horse is what you're looking for. You want to have sound stifles and straight legs and a mentally sound horse. Don't rush that period of time. Go slow at 2 with baby lessons, come back a spring later at 3 and do a tiny bit more. At 4, you can really start asking a lot more of them. And certainly if your passion is something like jumping or something like that, you have many years to wait for these growth plates to be healed up. So here's a yearling just walking across, and they look like they're kind of all legs, and it's a funny age. They're kind of all legs, and they think they're all that. If they're around an older horse, they emotionally will mouth submission. It looks like they're chewing bubble gum. So they'll come up to an older horse and immediately start opening and closing their mouth really rapidly. And that's telling the older horse, you are the boss. I'm approaching you and I submit to you. You are the boss. So they'll do a lot of that behavior. Not so much with humans. You know, they're more interested in saying, hey, you're smaller than me, I bet I can shove you around. So it's a pecking order time. You can't ruin a yearling by playing with them through their whole yearling year. I know people that have, you know, 1 horse and they have it as a baby and then on as a yearling. They have the time to put in, and so they play with a yearling. They lunge them and do all kinds of things with them. So it's not that that's wrong. It's just in a bigger breeding operation where you have 12, you know, there aren't enough hours in the day. So you just kind of turn them out and start playing with this year's winglet crop. They do a lot of nipping. They do a lot of kicking at each other and nipping and shoving, and they're learning etiquette horse to horse, what flies, what doesn't, how to read each other's body signals, you know, what's okay and what's not okay. So it's a really important time, again, for them to be with other horses of their same size and same age. These are gypsy vanners. That's a short but definitely a draft breed. So personally, I wouldn't put gypsy vanner yearlings in with my quarter horse yearlings or my paint yearlings. They're a heavy muscle horse as a yearling, and they wouldn't mean to, but they could do damage. But putting a bunch of them together, it's a fair fight. It's totally okay. So you'll see they nip each other and they pin their ears and they do all these behaviors. They're playing, but they're also learning. They're learning who's dominant, who's alpha, what happens if I give you this signal or that signal. So it's a very important time for them to have time together, time to play, and time to learn, oh, wow, that hurts when you put your teeth on me. That stops them from doing it, right? So they've got to learn a lot of these lessons. So this is a little standardbred, or spotted mountain maybe, horse, and he's out, you know, with people playing with him, and that's great. It's great to bring him out and show him the world and let him see what things are, as long as they have a lot of that free playing time. So one of the reasons we do Equine Studies 101 is to work on the vocabulary for a lot of people, just to know what is meant by this term or that term. So if you're fairly new to horses, you might not have ever had anybody just explain this to you. So a green horse just means a young horse that's in the beginning stages of learning to be ridden and beginning stages of whatever, maybe driven, whatever their job is going to be. So a horse is green, usually not all the way to 7, but they're usually green for a few years. It just means they're in school. They're in elementary school, high school, and they're learning everything about how to be and how to get along with humans and what's expected of them in life. If you say that a horse is an adult or a prime age of a horse, you're talking 7 to 12. That's when a horse is usually at its highest dollar value, is 7 to 12, because if they have training on them that's been invested in them, and the training can be quite pricey on horses, so they've got training, they've got experience, they've got their bone structure. I mean, they're really a prime adult. So this is your 28 to 40-year-old, you know, in the human world. So they're a prime hire, you know, so you're looking for a horse price-wise, they're going to bring their highest price most likely right there. Your seasoned horse means they've got some experience. So they're 13 to 18, and that means they've been there, they've done that, bones are solid, they've got their training, they are who they are, they know what they know, and they're confident. They're not afraid of every little thing. So a lot of people look for a seasoned horse, for a trail horse, for instance, a horse that's been there, done that, and has been around the block and seen a few things in their life. So that's when somebody says it's a seasoned horse. That's what they mean. And then an aged horse is 19 plus. Now I'll tell you, when I was a girl, if you had a horse that was over 20, that was an old horse. But because of nutrition and oral dentistry and worming and vaccinations and the world is very different, and horses live well into their 30s. I have a friend who celebrated the 45th birthday for a horse just recently. So they can live and be ridden and have really good lives if there's no injury or gap. So if you buy a horse that's in their early 20s, or somebody gives you a horse in the early 20s, you have a seasoned, lovely horse. If they are sound, keep riding them, keep them working. That's the key. Just like humans, when they get older, you know, if you move it or lose it, right? So keep them moving, keep them doing things, and I know people that ride them well into their late 20s. So horses are, by nature, herd animals. They feel safest if they're in a herd, and in the wild, a herd is 7 to 10 horses. They're not 30, 40 horses. They're 7 to 10, like a family. And a horse living alone is usually not a very happy horse. They're uneasy and nervous because they're doing all the jobs. They're doing the sentinel, and they're doing everything, right? So it's too much for a horse to live alone in most cases. If you have a horse living alone, get a miniature horse if you can't have two, or a goat, or some other herd animal to live with the horse, and they'll be much happier. The alpha mare is the dominant mare, but I'll tell you, the most common misnomer that I know of is people will think, because of probably our westerns when we were kids, that the alpha mare fought her way to the top of the rank, right? But it's actually a much more beautiful story. She's often not the toughest, meanest mare. That's a real misnomer. She's really the mare the most willing to be in service to the herd. They're much kinder than we are. And so she's the mare who says, I will listen for the stallion. If he alerts the herd that there's a problem, whether it's smoke or human or cougar, I will choose the direction and lead the herd to safety. So that's her job. So she doesn't lay down. She always stands. The herd doesn't pass her. If she's trotting, they don't canter. They trot behind her, usually in kind of a triangular shape, like a flock of birds. And she keeps going until she feels like, okay, we're out of that imminent danger. And then she looks around and waits, and the stallion will often find himself on a higher point And if you look at horses, your stallion has the big jaw and the big nostrils and tiny ears, very, very large eyes, because those are the things he needs for his job. So look at photos of stallions, and that's what you'll see, because he needs to be able to see a great distance. He needs to be able to call out to that mare and make a lot of noise so she can hear him. So those are his tools. Your alpha mare, however, will have very long ears, large ears. And so if you have a mare with large ears, she was probably genetically alpha from her DNA. And so they can hear the stallion if he's a half mile away. They can hear him call to her and say, go, there's smoke, or go, there's a cougar. So they'll go. Then you have volunteer wing mares. Those are often your middle-aged mares that are on the outside of the V formation. And your wing mare's job is to keep the younger horses, the babies to yearlings, inside the formation, and any elderly horses inside the formation. So they're kind of bringing up the rear and holding the shape for the alpha mare and following her. In domestic care, you know, we still see these behaviors. These are strong behaviors for horses, but it all shifts up because we're putting them in an unnatural place, right? We're putting them in a fenced place, not an open place, sometimes in a small place for the number of horses. And so they don't have the ability to run, you know, long. They can't run for a mile or 2 miles at will. So for the average person that has horses, the horses have simply domesticated these roles. And so you'll see it with sometimes, you know, ears pinned back, and it'll look like dominance when they're really just saying, you know, mind your manners, this is where we would be in a natural setting. So, and again, people do different. I like to have mares in one paddock and geldings in the next. I think it keeps your vet bills down, but we'll just leave that for each person. So this is like 2 herds together. So this is a wild band, and this is 2 herds together. That's why there's so many in the photo. And so you would have your alpha here, and you have your wing mares that are in charge of taking care of these babies, even though they're with their mothers. And so it's fun to kind of watch these natural herds and what their behaviors are and see how they're all kind of coagulated together. So unlike cattle, if you're herding cattle will be cows up in here messing around and cows over here. They don't stick together always in a nice, neat little band. Horses tend to band very well together. I'm doing a women's retreat in Montana this summer on a 30,000 acre 6th generation Montana ranch. It's absolutely stunning. It's called the Bonanza Creek. And she has 45 incredibly fit, well cared for horses that go out on 350 acres every night. And at 8 a.m. every morning, the alpha mare has all 45 horses standing at the ranch gate, down from the 350 acres all the way down to that ranch gate every morning. They each receive a pound of omeline, which is how they're baited in, and every horse is checked. Their shoes are checked. Everything about them is checked. And if there's people in to ride, so we usually have 10 women, and so there's about 15 of us that go on these rides, and so they pick which ones are suited for what people, and they keep in that 15. It's an incredible experience, and we are up there Thursday through Sunday, and we have 3 nice rides, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, plus a lot of other stuff and great food. If you have an interest in that, call my office. I think we have 2 spaces left for that. But this reminds me of that land in Montana, and it is so fun to see the horses in their natural state and the cattle in their natural state. They run several thousand Angus cattle on that ranch. I'm actually doing an interview with her, an interview webinar with her April 26th. So if you're interested, no. So here's another look at just horses running free, and this one's in Wyoming, and they're just a natural band going out there. This would be probably a breeder's band, so it's not as much in a natural band, but you can see the V formation, and in case you don't recognize it, if you're new to horses, these mares are in foal. So this one's in foal, this one's in foal, this one's in foal. So they show this preggy belly below the elbow and across is how you can really really see that they're in foal. So somebody's moved them to get this photo, because mares in foal don't run unless they really have to. And so these guys are migrating these mares to another place. All right, so emotions through horses are often shown in common body language. That's how they communicate to each other, and it's how they communicate to us. And so again, this is a 101 class, so this is very basic. So please know that it gets much more complex. But one of the basics they have is a sign language of their ears. So let me talk about their head for just a second. So they have nostrils on the left and the right side, and they operate independently, and they give the horse different information in their left nostril and their right. They also have eyes, and everything that is a prey animal has an eye on each side of their head. Predatory animals, cougars, humans, etc., their eyes are all straight forward, like a dog, all of that. So your prey animal can see everything to one side, and then they have a separate picture going into their brain with everything from the other side, and they reconcile all that in their brain. So it's kind of miraculous as you do. We'll talk more about the nostrils in just a minute. But a horse with his ears relaxed yet forward, so this is what I would call relaxed yet forward. This horse is simply looking at something way over here, probably a little bit in the distance. And I will tell you that in their eyes have a natural bifocal right in the middle. So if this horse needs to see something far away, he needs to lift his head and look through the bottom half of his eye to get clear far away in the bifocal. If he wants to see something close up, he has to tip his nose down and look through the top of his eye, so they'll usually lower their head to do that, to see something close up. Again, this is a horse with a lot of interest forward, so you can almost see those ears as gun sights. So they're just direct at what he's looking at. Both eyes are forward. He's really curious about something he sees in front of him. This is another one. This was a little horse I had named Aubain. He's a little gypsy vanner. He looks pregnant. He's not. He's gelding. But ears perked straight forward. The closer the tips are, the more interest they have into what they're looking at straight forward from them. So, and he has a lot of natural curiosity. This is one of my geldings, QT, and he absolutely loves to have his neck scratched. So he's simply showing happiness and joy right here for him. He was a stallion till he was 7. So I wanted to put this picture in here. These large jaw bones are from being a fully developed stallion. And also large eyes. Remember we talked about that? But little ears. So he's a very typical stallion, but you don't get to see them from underneath very often. And these are those big round jaws that a stallion has. And I'm just giving him a scratch, so he's happy right there. This horse is looking at something often behind him, right? So he's turned around and looked back another way. So they are very flexible and can do that. So both eyes and ears. Now his ears aren't pricked forward. They're forward, but they're relaxed. So let me show you the difference again. So look at Aubain's. That's pricked forward. They're fully rotationally forward with these tips inward to each other. So he's kind of looking and curious and concerned about whatever he's seeing right there. This one is like, oh, yeah, here comes so-and-so. That's good. So he's calm and relaxed. He's not worried about what he's seeing. I'll let you look at that one more time. So little concerned, you know, kind of like, huh, what is that? I need to really get a bead on that. To casual, okay, I know what's happening. So that's some of their more subtle ear language. This is one of my colts, a gypsy vanner, all the hair. But these are ears that are relaxed, right? So they're somewhat forward, but you can see how far apart the tips are. So he's relaxed. He's paying attention to some sounds around him, but he's not really dialed in to any specific thing. He's kind of censoring to the left and the right, and a little more on his right side forward, and this one completely relaxed. They can rotate them any way that they want. They can rotate one back, one forward. So they're taking in different parts of the information and logging it in different parts of the brain. This is a great eye shot. And you'll learn in some of our other webinars, those of you that are students in ES 101, that horses have actually 3 eyelids. So they have the lower and the upper, and they actually have a third one to protect the eye. So you'll see some of it starting right in here is that third eyelid. You always want to see an eye clear and bright like this, not draining, just nice and soft. This is what's called a soft eye. So this eye is 7/8 open, not 8/8 open. So he's not overly concerned, just kind of taking in the view. And that tells you a very relaxed position on this horse to see that, what a horseman calls a soft eye. So do horses have sense of humor? I think they do. I think they clown with each other. I think they clown around with us. And so I just thought this was a cute photo. And so these guys are yawning. In therapy work, I call it leeching, where they're taking the energy off a human and then discharging it. But for the most part, these guys are clowning around. And just like humans, one starts yawning, another will see it, and they'll start yawning too. So it's kind of fun. Okay, so now these guys are all looking in the same direction, so I'm just showing you some more of the ear language there. Oh, I don't know where he came from, but he's kind of cute. Okay, so now, giving a horse a bath. So you're squirting the bath water, the hose, at him. This is not cold water, or he'd be leaving. He's saying, okay, that water's an okay temperature. It's a nice hot summer day. He's paying attention this way to things going on there, and this way, protecting his ear and paying attention right here. See his eye comes down here? So he's really watching, even his nostrils. His whole face and expression is saying, I'm making sure that you're squirting me with the hose and it doesn't get up here too close to my face and ears. So he's not mad, he's not overly happy, but he's definitely, with this side of him, paying close attention here, and this side paying attention to something that's happening off to his right. Many times you'll see horses cock a back leg, and it's usually a sign the horse is very relaxed and even taking a little bit of a break, taking some of the weight off of their hip bone and just kind of chilling out a little bit. So if you're standing with a horse at halter and he does that, he's just chilling out, just relaxing all the way through. If you're riding a horse and he does that, you definitely can feel it, and you know that the horse is just flipped into neutral. So when you get ready to ride forward, you need to pick up the reins and talk to him and let him know, hey, we're getting ready to go somewhere. You don't expect to launch a rocket from a relaxed neutral position. So just kind of pay attention to what they're telling you. He's telling you, all right, if you're going to stand and chat, I'm going to chill. I'm going to relax. So it's a nice, for me, it's a nice sign. So horse, standard of a horse just kind of chilling out. I don't know why I have that twice. This I thought was really funny too. So clearly somebody probably staged this, but I'll tell you, cats and horses, oh darn, cats and horses have the best relationships, and they can do some really funny stuff together. So you can see horses that will let cats do things to them they won't let anybody do. And so I think this picture was probably staged, but I'm not 100% sure. So I've seen stuff where cats are sitting on their backs, taking a nap on their hip. I mean, just all kinds of stuff. And there's a natural thing between horses and cats. They really do. Even though larger cats, like cougars, eat horses, they're very fun and they're very tolerant. And cats really like to clown around with horses, get in the feeders or get under their feet. You think the horse is going to kill your cat, but they get along very well. So this little baby nursing, and I wanted to show you, this is that left and right eye thing. So he's got his eye on the photographer and his ear on the photographer. This eye is watching what he's doing. So they really put things together in a different way. Nursing is a very positive thing for babies, and just for note of interest for foals, if you make a foal nervous, he's still nursing on mom, and you make him nervous about something, you know, you're wearing a funny hat or just anything, they'll go over and nurse, not because they're hungry, but because it's very nurturing to them. So it's like a baby with a pacifier. So you watch and you bring maybe another horse to the gate, and the baby will say, who's that horse? Oh my gosh, and they'll go nurse from mom for just a minute or two. It's just like reassurance and kind of getting that reassurance that they need. So it's kind of fun to see. Horses do mutual grooming. So this is not a bite. This is one horse scratching another horse. And if you've been around horses, you've seen this. And so they do this mutual, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours routine. And it can turn into a bite if they feel like it and they're playing around. But for the most part, this horse, you can see it in his teeth. He's actually shedding a little bit of this horse out and kind of pulling some of the hair off of him. So they'll do this mutual grooming, and they'll stand for quite a long time doing it. And some horses never mutual groom each other's and others do. So it's one way in a pasture that we kind of can see who's getting along with who's always ostracized, who always does this mutual grooming with each other, and who never does. So we do observe that in our pasture horses. Now, one thing you should know as a new horseman, as an Equine Studies 101 horseman, is if you scratch your horse, they'll often turn around and bite. And they're not biting you, they'd like to mutually groom you. But of course, we're made of flesh, not horsehide. So you're scratching their withers and you think, why does he turn around and nip me? What he really wants to do is scratch your back with his teeth. If you're scratching his back, he's like, oh, that's nice, I'll scratch your back with my teeth. But we're not made of the tough material that they are, so it doesn't go over as well. So if you're gonna scratch a horse up here on his withers, keep your left hand over here and your palm open, so when he turns his nose around, he sees the stop sign of your palm and runs his nose into your palm, and they get the idea. It's like, no, I want to scratch you, but I don't want you to scratch me back, and they do pick up on that. But don't discipline them for biting you because you started it. So this is one of my little miniature horses, and he's deceased now, but he was the cutest thing, and I wear these crazy visors, so I used to always put my visor on him. His name was Pepper, and this is our little miniature donkey, which we still have, thank God. Her name's Bitsy, and they would do this mutual grooming thing forever. He looked like a little miniature Frisian, tiny little guy, and they were husband and wife. They just loved each other. When he died, she literally, I had a class going on there, about 12 of us there, and so we made a circle to do kind of a prayer circle around his body. And I turned around and she was up on a hill. She was always loose on our farm. She was up on a hill, and I said, Bitsy, do you want to join the circle? And she trotted in. She gave him a lip kiss on the lips. She kissed him on the lips. All of us gasped, and she ran back out of the circle and ran far, far away to just kind of be in her sadness. But she really mourned him a lot, and we all did, but she really did. And she gave him a full-on kiss on the lips, and I've got witnesses to prove. So these would be coming 2-year-olds, so they're a little bit larger than a yearling. They have a little bit of maturity in their bone structure. So these guys would be coming up to join the ranks of ones that are going to enter their first training usually, and so they're shedding out their spring hair and getting ready to come to school, and they're very curious about trainers and all these things that are going on. This is a behavior that we see in horses, and people are always asking me what the heck this means. So it's called the Flehmen response, and so it's really a couple of things. So their sense of smell, their olfactory system, it's called, their sense of smell, you know, is the way they recognize odors. And oftentimes, in looking at this horse's coat, the extra shine and the gleam, he may have been a stallion. It's very common for stallions or geldings who have a lot of stallion traits. Maybe they were left, like my horse was, a stallion for a long time. They'll pick up the scent of a mare's urine, and they want to take the pheromones or the hormones in that and push it up into their nostrils to their brain. So they're doing an assertion of who she is, where she's been, who she belongs to. They can tell themselves so much about who she is. Now they'll do it on other geldings' scent, so they might have other horses, and they want to say, who's this? Who's on our territory? Who's here with me? So they're gathering an immense amount of information, for one, and it's usually hormonally based. But, you know, our main sense of smell, just like us, we say, oh yeah, that's vanilla, and it makes me think of cookies, right? That's how our brain works. But the accessory olfactory that they have, it doesn't require the horse to recognize a smell or a compound. So they aren't saying, oh, vanilla, it's a cookie. It really signals what are the oldest part of the brain. It goes all the way to the amygdala, and it's to stimulate more instinctive and emotional reactions or behaviors for them. So, such as fear. So they can smell fear. They can smell a mare getting ready to mate. They can elicit all kinds of physiological changes with it. So it's not like our sense of smell. You know, we sniff vanilla and think cookie. Is not the same for them. They're actually bringing in layers and layers and layers of information about their safety, about who's there, about all these different things. So you can see the phlegm response in horses of any age or sex when they come in contact with a new smell. Like, for instance, I'll see it sometimes when we're deworming. So you take a dewormer out and they get that funny taste or that funny smell, they'll do this phlegm response. They're bringing it up into their brain and saying, what the heck is this taste, or what is this smell? So they're gleaning all kinds of information from it. So we usually laugh, I mean, because coincidentally they'll do it at sometimes some very funny times, like you'll say something and the horse is doing that. So it's kind of fun, but that's actually what they're doing. So these are ears turned back. So we've talked about ears forward and ears relaxed. This is turned back. So this horse would be listening, dang it, sorry, a horse listening to a horse behind them, noise behind them, maybe you're walking up behind them, or if they were a bridled horse, maybe somebody giving him a cue, and they'll turn their ears back toward what's happening, back toward the stimulus. This horse has a halter on. He's sticking his tongue out. His eye, to me, does not look happy. Halter's not fitting right, by the way. Halter should be up in here. But he's got one half of him looking out the window at what's going on outside the barn, and the other one not looking too happy. It's just a little bit back. And this is where, where experience with horses comes in. So I would be aware of this horse's ear trending back. I'd be aware of his mouth trending open, and I'd be aware of his eye starting to kind of close. So this horse does not have that loving, soft eye in this moment in time. So they're probably like the farrier's working on him, or something's going on back here. Maybe the vet's getting ready to give him a vaccination. He doesn't look thrilled. So those are the things you learn with time and experience to kind of see all their different emotional expressions. Droopy ears, calm and relaxed. The horse might even be asleep. So this guy, he's got him, you couldn't have one more left, right? He's just sort of chilling. His eyes are closing and he's like, whatever. You can point a camera at me all you want. So I think it's important to kind of notice that, okay, stiffly forward, they're nervous or alarmed at what's ahead, like we saw with Abe, and they're checking something out, and they might be ready to do one of their favorite things when they're afraid, and that is to leave, right? That flight or fight. So they're in that whole fright signal when the ears, the points are toward each other, and they're very stiffly perked, and the eye is fully open, and the nostrils are there. This horse body language is saying, I'm just 1 millisecond away from getting the heck out of here. So if you're standing next to a horse that's holding that posture, that's good information to have, because when he exits stage left, if you're standing there, they'll go over you. So you want to be paying attention to this. This is a drawing. It's a painting by Jan Taylor, but I put it in here because I think it really shows that. His nostrils are flared, his eye is fully open, he's got a little worried furrow, and he's got these ears fully perked. So he's really interested and not totally sure, all on the muscle here, of whether he's going left, right, or center. He's assessing the situation. Another one assessing the situation, but you know, again, if you're a horseman, you look at that and you go, yeah, he's not going anywhere. He's just checking it out. So it's a more relaxed facial expression. And a lot of it just comes from experience, just being around them, but really pay attention to what they're telling you with their face. Ears pointed left and right, we talked about, the kind of taking it all in. Now this one, and gosh, it wasn't blurry today, but it is now. This horse looks like he doesn't even have any ears. These ears are pinned so completely flat against this horse's head. And I love this photo because this horse couldn't care less. So this horse is saying, I am about to kill you. I'm absolutely going to kill you for whatever you just did or said. And this horse is like, whatever, I'm not afraid of you. So really not, this horse is not reading the signals or says, she does that all the time. She doesn't mean anything by it. So normally this horse would be out of here, stage left pretty quick with that much anger being shown. So eyes, again, soft. These are soft eyes. These eyes are not open all the way. They're not stretched out. Just kind of soft nostril, one ear back, one forward. So this horse is just relaxed, just chilling out, kind of checking things out, but not a care in the world right then. This is that ear split, and there's a word for it. It's called pinned. P as in Paul, P-I-N-N-E-D, pinned. So a horse with pinned ears and a dropped eyelid and the mouth open, they are really ticked off, and they might fight or bite or kick. And so you rarely see it towards a human. That's a pretty tough behavioral sign if a horse does this expression toward a human. It's usually a mare, very rarely a gelding. It could be two stallions, but it's usually a mare, and she is mad, and she's going to take care of it herself. And I think emotionally, there's one, emotionally the good thing is that they settle their disagreements and they let go of it. They don't hold on to grudges like humans do. They're very much in the moment. They're going to fix it, and then it's done. They don't the next day go, boy, you really made me mad yesterday, and we'll dwell on it for years. If you were to walk into a stall with this horse, and we are not an interactive class, but if we were, I would ask you, if you opened the gate to walk into this pretty horse's stall, and this is what you saw, I would hope instinctively you would say, doesn't look happy to see me. This is not a happy look on a horse's face at all. This is a go away and leave me alone look. Now, I will say horses that are stalled too long or stalled too much, they learn this look. They learn that, oh, you go away when I do that, so I'll do it. So you can call their bluff or have a trainer help you call their bluff. But usually it's because the horse has been intruded upon. So I'll tell you something that I teach in my CERT program. If you had a hula hoop around you, that's your personal space. So if you ever hula hooped as a kid, you can picture that kind of amount of room around your body. Anybody that gets closer to you, like they're inside your hula hoop, you better have invited them there or given them a clear signal it was okay, right? So a horse's hula hoop is 15 feet, even though we keep them in 12 by 12 stalls many times. So they are pretty used to us being rude, used to us just opening a gate and coming in with a halter. You will help your horse, if your horse is like this, a lot by learning to stand 3 feet back from the gate, taking a breath, talking to your horse, hey, Ginger, how you doing today, baby? Giving that horse time to go, all right, you're coming in my bedroom, I know you are, come on in. So it's giving them a heads up and not expecting them to just be jolly happy to see you no matter when you show up. Give them time to know you're there. And many horses get like this because the crew that cleans the stalls, we have a ranch in Arizona, and I have 80 horses standing on that ranch tonight. And when the men clean the stalls, I keep these guys and I pay them well because they are so good with these horses. And the horses love them. They just love them. And so if they have this response, it's sometimes because somebody's come in the stall and pushed them off with a pitchfork so they can clean the stall. You know, somebody's not been nice to the horse and they're not feeling like being nice to the person. This is that bubblegum body language I was saying you'll see in young horses, usually horses 18 months of age or younger, sometimes 2 and under. They'll do this in submission to an older horse. So there he is. They look like they're these little baby teeth. They look like they're kind of chewing bubble gum when they do it, but it's a cute behavior, and they don't do it to humans, but they definitely do it to other horses, older horses. So here's a fun one. This is snaking. So seen in stallions usually, rarely in a mare, but I have seen mares with a lot of testosterone, and very rarely in geldings. But with stallions, a lot of times you'll see it. We have a little 2-year-old gypsy banner mare, and she's been sassy like this always. She's snaked her head quite a bit. So we know that she can have this body language for sure. And here's one, dipping their head down and snaking. This is usually at another horse. This is a threatening move, you know, get out of my space and get out of it now kind of thing. So they'll go through that. This was a stallion out in the wild herds of McCullough Peak. You can see how beat up he is. And there was actually another stallion band. So he's saying to that band, get out of here now. I have my family. I'm happy with my family. And I don't want to see you on my territory. So he's really saying, I'm going to fight if I have to. So it's a very serious when you see a stallion do that. Nose out, ears back. He's going in for making his point. Definitely making his point if he had to. And thank God usually they don't have to. Usually the other stallion says, whatever, dude, we'll go west, you go east. This is something that happens a lot, especially with geldings, where they do play stallion fights. So if you watch them closely, there's very little real biting or real kicking going on. There's a whole lot of, I'll pretend I'm a stallion and you pretend you're a stallion and let's rear and you know, do this big thing. And it's usually a sense of play between them, even though to our human eyes it doesn't look that way. And yeah, they can hurt each other, but usually they come out of it just fine. They're not getting real serious about it. Mares, however, will ring a tail and back up their hind end to another mare, and that mare turns her hind end toward that mare, and they will kick it out, and damage is done. So when two mares get into it, it can be loud and scary and not fun to watch. Two geldings, it's usually almost humorous because two geldings are not trying to really hurt each other. Two stallions, that's a whole other thing again. So this horse is in a very relaxed state. Ears are relaxed, eyes open, he's sniffing the ground, probably looking for a place to roll. So this is about 2 hours later on McCullough Peaks with the same stallion. You can see his eye is still way out there, and his neck, you maybe can see his neck is more relaxed. He's not snaking, but he has not taken his eye off that band that eventually left. They left and left him alone, but he's watching for that. So this, I think, emotionally, this horse must be saying a 4-letter word. So I throw it in here just because I think it is the most shocking photo that I have seen that some dumb A human has done to a horse for whatever reason and whatever price the ticket is that people pay to see that. This one really ticks me off every time I see it. So this is fear in this horse's eyes, even though this poor horse probably does this for 2 or 3 shows a day so that humans can be entertained. And I feel for the lion too. So this is an extremely unnatural, rough thing for both the horse and all of that. And people are probably applauding and think it's really entertaining if they don't know anything about horses. All right, we're almost done, but I want to take you through some other things. Remember, this is a 101 class. So horses do sleep, and they sleep lying down usually, especially if domesticated. They can sleep standing up, and they'll sleep in groups. So you'll see groups of horses laying down and asleep. And many times they lay out flat, especially if the ground's warm and the air is cool. Then you see horses go and lay completely flat. So in our spring that we're coming into, if the ground is warmed by the sun but the air is cool, you'll see them all out there just completely flat. And so I think this is a really sweet one because he's positioned his nose in the dirt and he's just like, oh my gosh, I feel so good just taking a little nap. But that's napping when you're still up like that. Here's a bunch, trail horses just tied to the rail and just enjoying resting and relaxing, and their eyes are closed. It's so sweet, and they're just sound asleep. So just getting that time in. This guy has somebody who loves her, and so she's all tucked in her blankie. That's what my horses are like, in their little deep sawdust pens. We always say ours live in like a nice hotel. So in the winter they've got all this warmth, and in the summer they're out in pasture, so they got it pretty good. So let's see here. So not uncommon to have 1 or 2 horses lying down and 1 horse standing up. So usually your alpha will watch over the herd. And what's really kind of funny is with foals. you'll see the foals all lie down. You might have most of your mares lying down, but you'll have the babysitting mares standing up in the herd. So they're watching, you know, they're saying, I'll let you take a nap, Mabel, I'll let you know if anything exciting happens and you can get back up. So they're just sentry for each other. So these guys are napping, she's sleeping all out, and they're saying, we'll let you know, Mabel, if you need to jump up. So not uncommon to see a bunch of them laying down. I hate to see halters on horses in pastures, but not uncommon to see them all laying down. And and I think when you first see them lying flat in the spring, you know, people watch them. I do. I watch a horse for a while to go, please flick an ear or move a foot or something so I know you're okay, because they get so still when they just sort of pass out asleep like that. You know, it's very very familiar to a dead horse, to be honest, when they just lay flat like that. So you think, boy, please flick your tail or an ear or something, you know, to let me know you're okay. But if you watch, you can usually see them breathing. And this is a gelding, and he's just got a nice bunch of weight on him. He's not a mare and foal. So just having a good nap in the spring or summer grass. So that's great. So it wouldn't be complete on the emotional horse without briefly going through vices. So just like us, horses can form vices, and just like us, they form vices because usually they're unhappy. There's something going on that they're not liking, and it's their way of telling you that. So I don't let mine smoke a cigar, have a martini, by the way, or wear a jacket like that. So boredom can do it. Too much confinement can do it. Lack of company, a stressful routine, aggressive handling by humans, or anxiety can all bring this on. And by the way, horses do not do anxiety on their own. You'd never see a wild bunch of horses out there in anxiety. Anxiety in horses is caused by humans and by things that humans are doing. So if you think about the emotions of horses, they can be confident, unsure, worried, bold, timid, hot, hungry, relaxed, tense. They can do all of those. What they don't have emotionally is hatred or envy or spite or vengeance or greed, right? They don't have all those lovely things that humans do. And so we want to always be careful to know that, you know, they're doing the more basic things, and so vices come from us putting them in stressful situations. So this horse is doing what's called wind sucking. So he's literally opening his mouth, flattening his tongue, and sucking wind into his lungs. Now, horses cannot breathe through their mouths. That's what makes this a big deal. So horses breathe through their nostrils. They don't pant like a dog. If they do, they're dying. So they don't pant or breathe through that, but they learn to swallow these bubbles down into their stomach. And so it's a really not good thing for a horse to do. And so this is a metal piece on a band, on a breakaway band. It's a metal piece shaped so that the throat of the horse sits between the metal. So when he does this, it hurts. But most horses do what this horse is doing and just do it anyway. Cribbing is horses that have learned to chew wood. And once they learn it, they like to do it. And many times it is because they're frustrated or bored or whatever, but they can form almost an addictive habit with it. So there are ways to stop horses from doing it. I'll give you a short one from an old horsewoman, okay? You go and you get Tide, powder Tide detergent. You add a little bit of water to it, so it's a paste, and you paint the fence with it. They don't like the taste of the soap. It doesn't hurt them, but it will make them stop biting the wood. So whatever that's worth, right? Weaving is another one. So weaving means this horse is standing with his feet apart like this. The knees are far apart and the feet are far apart. And then he's taking his body left and right. It's about that motion. Very hard to stop a horse who weaves. It's very hard on the body. They can't do it forever. It's really tough on their caloric intake. It's tough on their knees and their joints. It's a really tough thing. And if you have a horse that weaves, other horses around it will adapt the behavior. So don't ever put your horse in a boarding situation straight across from a horse that weaves, because your horse will learn to do it. So they are monkey see, monkey do with the weaving thing. But it's usually a sign of too much confinement. It's a very hard thing, very anxious thing for a horse, a very hard thing and a sad thing to see. So it's kind of tough. And I will give you one other just quick tip, and we're almost done. You can take their forelock and braid it down and put, you have to do tiny little braids, like several tiny little braids, and put nuts, like heavy nuts and bolts on the end of it. So when they do it, it kind of bangs around on their face. It doesn't hurt them, but it bangs around on their face, and they don't like that. And I've seen horses that have stopped weaving because of that. So just an old tip. Oh, my little old tips. Yeah, you didn't know I was going to do that. Okay, so energy fields, very briefly. Daylight is essential for a balanced energy field in a horse, just like us. Vitamin D, bone formation, everything. They need daylight. And so horses that are healthy and happy, they have access to daylight and being able to get out and be a horse in the daylight. And so they have, just like us, they have an internal life force. They have vibrations, which is a whole other webinar. They have a spirit. They have a clairsentience, which means intuition. And they have different levels of sensitivity. And I've also written a book called Equusology. It's EQUUSOLOGY, so Equusology. And we have equusology.com if you're interested in the book. And it talks about their different temperament parts, like Myers-Briggs, I guess, for horses. So it's a fascinating book, I think, for how they have different, some are extroverted, some are introverted, all of that kind of thing. Their brain produces, just like ours does, 4 different energy frequencies. We call them alpha, beta, delta, theta. And during deep concentration, or when they're working as a healing horse on a client, all of those are open at once. So if you have a horse who works in hippotherapy or works as I do with horses for doing coaching and therapy with people, when the horse is really concentrating on the work, all of these are operative at once, which is an unusual state. It's an open, intuitive, altered state, and it's a beautiful state to see. We talked about how the left eye is the right side of the brain, the right eye is the left side of the brain. They're lateralized opposite to each other. And so most horses will use their right eye first to explore a new object. And more emotional horses will use their left eye longer with an unfamiliar object. So you can just observe your horse, put something he's never seen out there, and observe him. And you'll see, so, you know, does my horse stare at this more with their right eye longer or their left eye longer? And your more emotional-centered horses, the horses that are the big feeling horses, they'll use their left eye longer with an unfamiliar object. The right side of the brain, which means the left eye, right? The right side of the brain processes their emotions. So I watch for that when I'm looking for horses to do therapeutic healing work with me. I'll watch for horses that do that, that have this left side, right side thing going on. And it's exactly the same with their nostrils. Give the back of your hand, not your palm, to a horse and let them take in the scent. And they'll take it in usually with their left nostril, opposite their eye, right? Left nostril, then their right nostril, then their left, then their right. So they'll start with their left, go to the right, left, right. Some do it very quickly. Some take in a lot of scent. So it's one of the ways they're kind of sizing you up. So when you go to the barn, don't put stinky lotion on your hands. You might think it smells great, but your horse wants to smell what you smell like naturally. So, you know, if you wash your hands a lot and you use soap and all that, try to do something normal before you stick your hand up their nose, because it's really different for them. And they're taking in information with all of that. That's the view out of my former ranch. I don't live there any longer, but that was my ranch in, this was our riding arena, and that is the beautiful Rocky Mountains here in Colorado. So live in Elizabeth now. So I hope this was interesting to you guys. I think I have a few questions here, so let me just check and see. If you have a question, type it in, but we're running long on time, so we won't go too long. But question, I have a yearling gypsy vanner coming Congratulations. And only option for a herd mate is a sweet gelding, or should I put with the mini horses who are 5 years of age? Both minis and gelding are playful. I would say the gelding, because even a yearling gypsy is a big horse. They're usually not very tall, but they're very broad and they're very strong. And I'll tell you, I have gypsies, and one of the funniest things is they bend our fences all the time. We have these pipe and pole fence, and the gypsies hang their head over it once and it's bent. So they're strong. They're really strong draft horses. So I think a sweet gelding that is not trying to be aggressive with a young colt would be a good mate. With your minis, I'd be really worried that a yearling gypsy, not intentionally, because they have the greatest hearts of all breeds of horses, but not intentionally could hurt your mini. And he sure wouldn't mean to, but he'd just roll him over like a steamroller. So I think I would do that. But congrats on anybody getting a gypsy. I love them. Oh, so people are saying that was awesome, and thank you, thank you. And so thank you all for your attention. And I have another one here. Super info. I have a horse who I believe has PTSD. Would love to talk to you about how he reacts. Absolutely. I'll put our information up here so you know. That's our office number. I can't promise I can answer the phone, but somebody will answer it and they will get a message to me. I travel a great deal, but I will get back to you. And horses definitely can have PTSD. It is almost always human caused by some way, even if it's a barn fire. You know, we put them through a lot, and so it does take time to help a horse through PTSD, but it definitely can be done. You just have to kind of know some skills and some things of what you're doing. So somebody said, thank you, very informative. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, everybody. And a lot of people say, love this, so thank you. That makes us feel good. Joyce and I love this Equine Studies 101 course. There's 10 webinars, 2 camps. We have 5 incredible training teams ready to go. So if you learned something in this webinar, you would learn a lot in our ES 101. And we take payments on it. It's 4 payments of $625. You have 2 professional trainers and 6 people max in the class for 2 full weeks, so it's a great bargain. And we do send textbooks out, and you have all of these different webinars and such. So if you think you could learn more from Lifetime Horsemen, we would love to talk to you about the class. You can email to Jen. She's my point person in my office that takes care of this program. So it's jen@touchedbyahorse.com. She can tell you the other trainers and where their camps are, or you can go to equinestudies101.com, and it'll tell you who our trainers are and where in the nation and all of that. So, you know, it really can help you out a great deal. So I'm looking for other good information. Outstanding. Thank you, thank you. Well, you're welcome. What a nice group. Just a bunch of thank yous. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.